Welcome back to another FPL best free hit team. This time, out of Double Gameweek 37, I'll be discussing the best 50-man squad using this chip, but I'll also talk about some alternatives and some major differentials if you want to go a bit different, chase some ranks, and win your mini leagues. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to the 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 25,000 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon, the Championships Discord server, FPL League, FPL Challenge, as well as Spotify and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast if you enjoy the content. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Manchester United got decimated by Crystal Palace 4-0 and they're down to the bare bones at the back line, but Onana will be the backup. If you need an even cheaper goalkeeper for funds, then go for an Areola. You don't even need a second goalkeeper necessarily, but I'm going for Onana, and the first choice for me is probably the best goalkeeper in Gameweek 37 on paper. He's in great form with some good fixtures in Gameweek 37 and 38, and that's Petrovic. And Chelsea have really turned the corner since that 5-0 defeat to Arsenal, with 2 London derby victories against Spurs and West Ham, producing a 5-0 win of their own. And Petrovic for me is the best way to cover Chelsea defensively, although Cucurella and Chalobah are decent options in the defensive line, and I think these two goalkeepers have the saves potential and can do very well. Other options include Edison and Vicario amongst Double Gameweek goalkeepers. Apart from that, I'm not too keen on many of them. If you were to go for a single gameweek option in 37, I think Pickford at home to Sheffield United would be my best bet there, and probably the top tip among single gameweek options. But I have to say, I'd stick with double gameweek players and I'd go for Petrovic as your main goalkeeper. Kieran Trippier is back in full training according to reports, and his ownership is still 21%, but he's a massive upgrade on Dan Burn, Livramento and Lewis Hall, and the latter two could find themselves on the bench with Kieran Trippier being reintroduced to the side. Will he start both games? Not necessarily, but I think Trippier is definitely worth the risk for those on the free hit, and if you want an explosive differential in the defensive line, I think Trippier is probably the top pick in that regard. Now moving on to the other defenders, and I have to say the defensive line is the worst part about Gameweek 37. You mainly want to look at the midfielders and forwards, particularly for the captaincy, but there are some good options in here, and for me the best defender on paper for Double Gameweek 37 is Gvardiol. Kyle Walker is another one to cover that Man City defence. Now, some of you might want to triple up on City's attack, and I'll show you a draft, including Kevin De Bruyne and the other two major options very soon. But I still think Gvardiol is a safer option, and I still think he could be benched in one of these games, to be fair, but it's not a guarantee. And with the form he's in, playing so advanced and winning penalties, getting goals and assists, Gvardiol has been a great FPL option in recent weeks, and it all started with a great Champions League goal against Real Madrid at that stadium. But I think Trippier and Gvardiol are probably the two best picks, assuming they start both games in Gameweek 37. Will that be the case? It might not be, to be fair, but I'm backing at least one of Trippier or Gvardiol to start both matches, and even just one start could be enough to produce a massive haul. Now, I'm going to cover Spurs defensively, but not with Pedro Porro. Instead, I'm going for Christian Romero, who's in good form. I know Tottenham have lost 4 games in a row, but Romero's performed quite well individually. Against Arsenal, he was their best player and dragged them back into the game out of nothing, really, as Spurs were dead and buried. And against Liverpool, I think he was fairly decent. You can't really attribute any of the goals to him. And the same applies to the games against Chelsea. Maybe against Newcastle, Romero wasn't particularly great, but that's the only game where I think he was lacking, and he was still significantly better than his centre-back partner, Mickey van der Ven. But if you're covering Spurs defensively, you've got 3 options: Romero, Pedro Porro, and Vicario in goal, as discussed earlier. And on current form, I think Christian Romero is the best option, and he's got better goal threat than the Spaniard in Porro. But the bonus points is quite similar between the two, and then you've got the assists for the Spaniard, so it's still quite tricky. But I personally back Romero on the free hit and go a bit more differential in this position. Now I've got 2 defender slots left, and I'll talk about the starting 11 later on using FPL.team. Lewis Dunk could be a decent option for this double game week, but I look at both fixtures and Brighton will likely concede in both of them, but Dunk has goal threat and he could be a decent 4th or 5th defender. You don't even need to start him. And another good option on paper is Diogo Dalot, and I say that because he has those periods where he can get a lot of bonus points and the odd assist with 9 to 12 pointers, but with 2 home games against Arsenal and Newcastle, I definitely wouldn't recommend a defensive double up in Man United. and I'll discuss why I'm considering it myself for my own team selection, but it's not for the reasons you think in terms of getting FPL points. The last defender I'm looking at is a single game week option, and he's more of an enabler, a cheap option. You could even start him and get a return, and that's Branthwaite, who has been in great form, and Everton have really stepped it up in recent weeks since that 6-0 loss against Chelsea. And ever since, they've secured their safety with crucial victories against the likes of Nottingham Forest and Liverpool back-to-back, with clean sheets being kept in the process. One of Pickford or Branthwaite is absolutely fine. On the bench boost, you can even buy these players to fill your 15-man squad, and I wouldn't mind starting them for non-bench boost teams, but I would favour the double game week defenders from Newcastle, Man City, Spurs, and also Chelsea. And in this case, of course, I've got Petrovic in goal to cover that Chelsea defence. But let me know your thoughts on the comment section below about each position, and this free hit team is going to be very different to what you've seen compared to previous editions in the past, or even the wildcard videos and podcasts, because there's no Arsenal defensive coverage whatsoever. You can still go for Raya in goal, or even better still, a Gabriel Saliba or Ben White in the defensive line, but double game week defenders prevail. Phil Foden was quite disappointing against Wolves, and he only got the 1 assist in that game, whilst Erling Haaland scored 4 goals. But I think the fixtures in Game Week 37 could suit Foden even more. Those 2 away games against Fulham and Tottenham, and that is a stadium where City haven't scored in the Premier League in that specific stadium in the last 5 years. So that could be a very tough game for Manchester City, but in the form they're in, you'd back them to win any match at this moment in time, and Phil Foden is definitely the best midfielder you can buy. I know Kevin De Bruyne would be the main alternative, but if you're asking me, I'm going to pick Phil Foden all day long. Now, the second midfielder is Cole Palmer, and a bit similar to the Foden scenario, the only other midfielder I'd consider from Chelsea is Madueke, but you wouldn't go for him over Palmer. If anything, you go for both of them at the same time, and I'll show you that very soon. But Cole Palmer for me is by far the best Chelsea asset, and arguably the best midfielder in the game, especially when you look at value. So these two are essentials on the free hit in my opinion. If you want to go a bit different, I completely understand that, adding a De Bruyne and Madueke to the mix, but I wouldn't go for them at the expense of Foden and Cole Palmer. Now, the third midfielder I'm going for is a bit of a differential. He's just come back from an injury, and he looked very sharp against Liverpool, and that's Richarlison. Now, I'll talk about the starting 11 very soon. You can't start all 5 of these midfielders and the 3 attackers. Sacrifices have to be made, but if you were to go for a Spurs double up in the attack, I'd go for Richarlison, as Maddison has been benched recently and his form has been pretty awful. And you look at Brennan Johnson, he could be decent, but Richarlison is the one with the high ceiling, with the exception, of course, of Heung-min Son, who also makes it into this team. And I think he's a great captaincy option against Burnley and Man City, both home fixtures, and Son has a great record against both clubs. So in terms of the captaincy options we've had so far, Foden, Palmer and Son definitely spring to mind. I know a few Mavericks might consider Richarlison as well, but I wouldn't go there personally. But the final midfielder is Anthony Gordon. He offers tremendous value. I talked about buying him in the Transcripts video and podcast. Be sure to check that out as well. He has been tremendous in home matches. He even delivered away from home against Burnley in Game Week 36, but there are 2 away games left out of the last 3 matches that Newcastle have. But for Game Week 37, one of those fixtures is at home against Brighton, and Anthony Gordon has a great chance of hauling in that specific match. So I'd still recommend him, but if I'm choosing between him and Isak, I'm going to go for Isak. I think the fixtures do suit Isak better in Game Week 37 and 38, but Anthony Gordon is still the second best Newcastle asset, even over Trippier, if he's fit and available to start both matches. The front 3 is fairly template for Game Week 35 wildcarders. Nicholas Jackson is in great form, 16 points against West Ham. He also got 8 points in double Game Week 35, and he's in great form. You could even start him in this Game Week 37 free hit team, and I don't think he'd have too many regrets. The underlying numbers have always been there. His finishing can be questioned a lot of the time, but he has been delivering in recent weeks, and he was actually one of the saviours for me in Game Week 36 and prevented a huge red arrow in my personal situation. But Nicholas Jackson is still the second best Chelsea asset for me. Petrovic is in third, and then I put Madueke in fourth, and of course Cole Palmer is undoubtedly far ahead of the rest. And I'd also go for Erling Haaland. Very template, very boring. Hopefully the vast majority of us don't captain him, but I think that will be the case because of that performance against Wolves, and Erling Haaland has those games where he can score 3, 4, even 5 goals in a single game, let alone in a double game week. And to complete this forward line, Isak is another captaincy contender, and I think the 5 standouts would be Foden, Palmer, Son, Haaland and Isak. Haaland will be top in most people's lists, but I really think the other 4 can be considered, and those fixtures suit Isak to a T, who has been in incredible form recently, and as long as he can stay injury-free, he's always going to be right up there for the Golden Boot race, and he's on penalties. He did miss one against Burnley, which was quite disappointing, but he scored and assisted to make up for it a little bit. So that is the best 50-man squad on the free hit, in my personal opinion. I'm now going to show you what Drafthound are recommending for the free hit chip, and then afterwards I'll show you the starting 11 for this team with the captaincy, and after that the alternative picks with some major differentials like Madueke. Check out the link in the description below for Drafthound. I'd highly recommend you sign up as a pro pay tier member. Going into next season, you have the optimization tool to sort out your benching dilemmas, the transfers, and also captaincy decisions. You have the best wildcard and free hit teams for every single week, player rankings, you have the fixture ticker, player comparisons, and much more, like player scouting to identify the best differentials as well. I'm showing you the best wildcard team suggested by Drafthound because I feel this also is applicable to the free hit, and I have to say their wildcard team is better than the free hit one they've showcased as well. So they've got David Raya in goal. On the free hit they recommend Pickford, which is probably better, but in the defensive line they've got some great picks in there like Gvardiol, Pedro Porro and Hall. Just be careful with the likes of Livramento and Hall if Kieran Trippier is available to start both matches in Double Gameweek 37. Palmer, Gordon, De Bruyne and Heung-min Son completes the midfield 4 with Haaland, Isak and Jackson up front. They've got Olsen as the backup goalkeeper, but I feel that will change very soon. Emi Martinez is expected to start on Thursday night. This video and podcast is recorded on Thursday morning. Madueke is on their bench. I think that's a great differential shout. With Christian Romero and Ben White completing this 15-man squad, there are some big differentials in here like Madueke, who I really endorse. And in the next section, using FPL.team, like I mentioned earlier, I'll discuss the starting 11 and the captaincy for my best free hit team, as well as some differentials that can really make the difference. There are no major surprises with the lineup. Petrovic is in goal over Onana, but FPL.team actually have Onana with higher expected points than Petrovic, and Vicario is even higher than both of them because of that fixture against Burnley at home. The defensive line comprises of Trippier, Gvardiol and Romero, and the front 7 is Palmer, Son, Foden, Gordon, Haaland, Isak and Jackson. I've gone for Haaland as the captain and Palmer as the vice, and Haaland has the highest expected points in Fantasy Football Hub, FPL.team, Drafthound, but I have to say he can be targeted. You can go against him for the captaincy, but as you saw in Game Week 36, sometimes it can really backfire. The bench includes Onana, Richarlison, Dunk and Branthwaite, and in terms of some other differentials and players to consider, this is what I'm going to talk about in the next section, and the expected points is even higher with this squad, but that's because Trippier has 0 with the other team, and once those points are updated, the first team will have even higher expected points. So I've gone for Onana here, but you can go for Vicario and double up on Spurs defensively with Pedro Porro. Cucurella is my top pick as a Chelsea defender, but Petrovic is even better to cover that defence, and I've gone for Dan Burn over Kieran Trippier, and that helps you fund Kevin De Bruyne in the midfield. I've gone for Madueke, Foden, Son and Palmer, so 2 midfield double-ups with Chelsea and Man City. Erling Haaland and Isak up front, and the bench has Vicario, João Pedro, Dalot and Branthwaite. These are pretty much the best options for Double Gameweek 37. For Man United, defensively it's Onana and or Dalot, and to be honest, I wouldn't want to start any of them at this moment in time. For the bench boost, I probably will have at least 2 Man United players, depending on Bruno Fernandes's fitness. He's another one to consider if he's fully fit and available, and I believe he will be, but who would you even sell to make that possible? Maybe Kevin De Bruyne in this instance, but I still think if you were to go a bit different in the midfield, Kevin De Bruyne and Madueke would be massive differentials that can really help you gain the ranks for the last 2 game weeks of the season. And 1 million left in the bank for this team, and for the original squad discussed throughout this video, it's 1.3 million, so it's quite affordable for most of you watching. But if you aren't able to do so, there are a few things you can do here and there, and one of them could be downgrading Jackson to João Pedro with this first squad. You could even go from, let's say, Heung-min Son to a Maddison or a Brennan Johnson, but I wouldn't recommend that whatsoever. But I think the main one really is downgrading Trippier to Dan Burn, and that will just solve all your budget problems with this first squad, and it should do a great job regardless for Double Gameweek 37. For the second team, if you want to combine Trippier and Kevin De Bruyne in the same draft, you have to make sacrifices elsewhere, particularly in the bench, and that's the best way to go about it. My squad value is 105 million, and I've got a lot of money left over with both teams. 1.3 million with this squad you see here, and for the second team, 1 million left in the bank. So it's very affordable for the vast majority of people watching, and I have discussed some ways you can make it possible if you're struggling for funds in the first place. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's get this video to over 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 25k subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon, the Championships Discord server, FPL League, FPL Challenge, Drafthound, as well as Spotify and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast if you enjoy my content. It goes a long way to supporting the channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Double Gameweek 37 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.